Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue's season came to an end on Saturday night as Arizona pulled away in the second half, knocking Purdue out of the NCAA tournament in the Elite Eight and ending the careers of Purdue's spectacular senior class, Braden Smith, Fletcher, Loyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn. We'll talk a little bit about the loss to Arizona, look back on the careers of Purdue's Big Three, touch on the season that was, and much more here on today's show. If you don't, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. We'll be talking all things Purdue sports, all things college sports, mixing a little Chicago Cubs in there on the Twitter feed this summer. Come join the conversation there. You can always send in questions for the show. Do so on Twitter at Boilers Beyond or email me boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The season may be over. The podcast is far from it. We'll be here all summer long. We'll be here every week into the foreseeable future here, putting a bow on the Purdue season, looking ahead, talking a lot of Purdue basketball before we get into football mode. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. But Purdue's season comes to an end. Arizona 79, Purdue 64, marks the end of a fantastic 4 years of Purdue basketball. It comes to an end in the Elite Eight. Purdue was able to put together an improbably great first half, but in the end, Arizona was just too much. The size, the length, the activity, it was just all too much for Purdue. The physicality. In this game, Purdue needed everything to go its way, and it just didn't. It started quickly when Trey Kaufman-Renn picked up 2 fouls in the first 4.5 minutes of the game. And Purdue was able to overcome that in the first half. Purdue was able to piece enough together to take a 7-point lead into the break. But then right away in the second half, he picks up his third. And any momentum that carried through the 20-minute halftime was completely gone at that point. That was, it's not like the door was closed by any means. It was a 7-point game with 20 minutes to go. But Arizona had a hell of an opening right there, and it just took full advantage of it. And Purdue had to start playing really early on lineups that it hadn't played all season. Daniel Jacobson and Oscar Clough didn't play together all year. If they did, I don't remember it at all. Maybe something situationally, I don't know. But Purdue's out there for minutes at a time with those two on the floor together, a lineup that you wouldn't really want out there. They don't complement each other well. They don't. That lineup's not something you want to roll with, but Purdue had no choice. Purdue had to put size out there to do whatever it could against Arizona's front line. Purdue finished the day 8 of 22 from 3, but that number's a little bit skewed because 7 of those threes came in the first half, and then the 8th was Fletcher Loyer knocking down a corner 3 in the final seconds of the game when it was long decided. Purdue needed to have a really, really big day from the 3-point line to balance out what Arizona was inevitably going to be able to do from 2-point range. And Purdue didn't make enough. Purdue wound up with 11 turnovers. The number isn't staggering, but the timing of them. So some of them came at really rough times. Even in the first half, when Purdue had a really great half, there were some turnovers at times that, man, you just couldn't have it. It had to be a nearly perfect game for Purdue, and it just wasn't. It wasn't that, and Arizona really ran away with it there in the second half. And Arizona is outstanding. That is an excellent team. The size it brings to the floor creates so many problems on both ends. I know there's a lot of thought out there, and we'll talk about it later on in the episode, that Purdue's personnel is a big problem. The roster building approach is a big problem, but Arizona's 36-2 for a reason. Arizona's lost 2 games this year, one of them at Fog Allen Fieldhouse by 4, and the other in overtime to Texas Tech when it still had JT Toppin by 3. It's not like this team has been exposed a whole lot. It's an awesome, awesome Arizona team. As I record this, Arizona, I believe, is 4th all-time in KenPom adjusted efficiency margin. I mean, that's a really good team. There's zero shame in losing that game, but it always hurts to see it come to an end if you're a Purdue fan, because you do bid farewell to a spectacular class. You could make a very good argument that this is the greatest 4-year class in Purdue history. Braden Smith, Fletcher, Loyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn leave Purdue as the winningest players in program history. They really raised the level of the program. When these guys arrived, Purdue had been ranked number 1 in the AP poll for 1 week in program history. It happened once the year before. Purdue got to number 1, and then it got beaten its next game. These 3 spent time there in 3 of their 4 seasons. That's pretty notable. Purdue's made the Elite 8 7 times in program history. 2 of them came with those 3 in the starting lineup. They made it to a national championship game, won 2 Big Ten regular season titles, 2 Big Ten tournaments, a Sweet 16, another Elite 8. They've won more NCAA tournament games than anyone in Purdue history. And they served as a rarity, a 4-year class that stayed together in an era defined by player movement. The stat, I can't remember, was it 22 guys in power conferences played all 4 years at one school that finished up this year? 3 of those guys were at Purdue. That's pretty remarkable. It's pretty rare, especially guys who were as good as they were, especially with 2 of them being day 1 starters, guys who started every game, and then Trey Kaufman-Renn started every game for the last 3 seasons. And it became very well documented, and in my opinion, way too well documented for Purdue's liking, that these guys could have left Purdue and made more money elsewhere. But they stuck around Purdue. They were your ultimate culture guys that were bought into what Matt Painter has built at Purdue. As you look at him, Trey Kaufman-Renn is one of the more fascinating individuals that Purdue has ever had. I can't urge you enough. If you didn't read the piece that Brian Newbert did over at goldenblack.com before the Texas game about Trey Kaufman-Renn, it's outstanding. It's a great look at who he is and how unique he is off the court and on the court. A really high character dude, an awesome player. Braden Smith has his quirks, but he's been an incredible representative of Purdue. Fletcher Loyer has taken more BS than he ever should have from Purdue's own fans, but the dude continuously delivered on and off the floor. A really good class, a really good group of guys that obviously Matt Painter loved, and you could hear it in the post-game press conferences. As the season has wound down, you could hear Matt Painter just speak in such adoration of these guys that he just loved them. And never, if you're a Purdue fan, never take this senior class for granted. The success, what you had in these 3 guys, don't take it for granted. Braden Smith's jersey will be in the rafters the next time that you walk into Mackey Arena. He's a 2-time All-American, 3-time first team All-Big Ten honoree. He's the NCAA's all-time assist leader, over 1,900 points scored at Purdue. I saw a decent amount of Braden Smith in high school because I was fascinated with him when Purdue took him. And I'll never forget the first time I saw him in person was his senior year. Westfield was playing Fishers in the sectional, and I was there getting video of it for Golden Black. And Fishers was number 1 in the state. It was one of Garrett Weiniger's first teams at Fishers, I think. the kid at Notre Dame was a freshman on that Fisher's team. Braden Smith was playing on a broken foot, and he delivered probably the greatest point guard performance I've ever seen in high school. Westfield won that game by like 30. It was unbelievable. And then I'm sitting there at Mackey Arena for his third game at Purdue when Purdue's hosting Marquette. And the game's kind of teetering. No one knew what either team was going to be, and they were both turned out to be really good that year. And down the stretch, Braden Smith just took the game over. And at that moment, you just knew he was going to be really, really special. Did I expect this? No, I didn't expect it to be this outstanding. But it's a great story of, and Purdue's had so many of these, especially with Zach Edey recently, but an under-recruited player, someone who fell through the cracks. Obviously with Braden Smith, so much of it was the measurables, the height, the fact that he's small, but an outstanding story and a player who really you're not going to see another one like him. You just aren't. Fletcher Loyer leaves Purdue as the all-time leader in made three-pointers by a decent margin. I want to say he's up over 30 three-pointers more than Carson Edwards now. Over 1,800 points. He leaves 11th in all-time scoring at Purdue. Again, a guy who I think drew a lot of criticism just because of the way he looks, because he's not an uber incredible athlete, because he's not remarkably physically gifted from a leaping and running and jumping ability, but a guy who every coach in the country would take on his team. A great offensive player, a guy who impacted winning in so many ways. Kind of a coach on the floor out there from an off-ball position. A really phenomenal career for Fletcher Loyer, and he ended it on such a high note with a massive month of February and month of March. Terrific stuff. A terrific career for him, and I think he will go down, and for my money, he is this right now, the most underappreciated player in the history of Purdue basketball. And I do think when we get into next season, you're going to see the void that exists by not having Fletcher Loyer out there. And Trey Kaufman-Renn leaves Purdue with maybe the most fascinating career arc. This was a top 50 recruit right thereabouts who redshirted. You don't see that very often. You don't see many players redshirt at all in college basketball these days, let alone a top 50 guy. But it was maybe the best redshirt Purdue's ever given. As a freshman, he then averages 11 minutes per game off the bench. He didn't do a whole lot. As a sophomore, he started every game, but he averaged just 6 points. He was the fifth option on Purdue's offense. Playing next to Zach Edey, there weren't a ton of opportunities for him. And then Zach Edey leaves. He becomes Purdue's featured post player, and he exploded. He wraps up with over 1,600 points. First team all-conference as a junior. He was excellent. He was excellent, and did so with a really, really great playing style. Very unique. Very unique. Such a below-the-rim player, so crafty at getting to his angles. The little push shot was... I've never seen a player do that so effectively. This was an awesome group, and it marks the culmination of a season that I think is the ultimate test for the folks who like to claim that the month of March is the only thing that matters. Because if that's the case, this was a pretty good season. Purdue won the Big Ten tournament. It gets to the Elite Eight and loses to an Arizona team that very well could go on to win the national title. There's nothing to be disappointed in there. But Purdue does end the season 30-9. And losing 9 games wasn't something that was on the bingo cards for a lot of Purdue fans coming into this year. The regular season was what it was. It was a bit of a roller coaster. Purdue finished tied for 6th in the Big Ten regular season standings. It lost 5 times at Mackey Arena. Purdue began the season ranked atop the AP poll. It looked the part at times against Alabama, against Texas Tech, a couple of really impressive non-conference wins that Purdue had. But as Big Ten play got going, Purdue didn't look like that team. Purdue didn't win at that level. Purdue's defensive limitations were really handcuffing it in the regular season, but then postseason play came around, and Purdue was outstanding in the Big Ten tournament. It was a really, really great run, and that's not nothing. It shouldn't be. You're a team in a competitive space. Winning is always better than losing, and for Purdue fans, it made for a really fun weekend. And ultimately, that's what this is about. It's entertainment. And that weekend was really, really fun for Purdue fans as it ripped off 4 wins in a row in Chicago. And it beats Michigan in the championship game. One of the more impressive wins Purdue has had in recent years, and there have been a lot of them. But that's a great Michigan team that just won its Elite Eight game by 30 today and is headed to the Final Four with 3 losses on the season. That was an awesome, awesome win for Purdue. And in the NCAA tournament, Purdue wasn't perfect, but it got to the Elite Eight. And the Elite Eight is kind of purgatory because you made it to the second weekend, but you didn't make it to the Final Four. The Final Four is the pinnacle of the sport because you have the whole week of build-up. The entire sport descends on it. It's such a spectacle, but it's an underrated accomplishment. The Elite Eight's no laughing matter. Trey Kaufman-Renn's tip-in against Texas was a great moment. Purdue went on a nice run to end the season. The second half against Arizona was what it was, but this was a strong finish to an up-and-down season. The NCAA can be a bit of an unfair way to evaluate teams. As John Rothstein says, it can make mediocre seasons great, and it can make great seasons mediocre. Neither of those happened for Purdue, but I thought it really demonstrated both sides of the coin when it comes to the way brackets break for you, because Purdue got a really favorable draw with the 3-6 pod of Gonzaga and BYU, both teams that, when at full strength, were really good, but neither of them were going to be at full strength for the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga kind of let the Braden Huff worm dangle out there for the NCAA, but for BYU, Richie Saunders wasn't going to play. And a lot of what BYU did for its resume came with Richie Saunders in the lineup, and you saw both of those teams get bounced by Texas. Your modern-day double-digit seed that goes on a run. Just a power conference team that wasn't great in the regular season, but has a pretty decent ceiling as to how it can play. But Purdue gets it done there. It beats an 11 seed, takes advantage of that. But then you get Arizona, and that wasn't great fortune. A terrific Arizona team that Purdue plays in a de facto away game in San Jose. It is what it is, right? It reflects the importance of excelling in the regular season to try to control your destiny a little bit more. But Purdue picked up too many losses to where it was at the mercy of the selection committee. And while it got its most favorable first weekend location, obviously going to the West Regional where you play Arizona is suboptimal, especially when it's an Arizona team that's just spectacular. If there was a fatal flaw for this team, it's positional size. You saw it against Arizona. You saw it at times this season. It is what it is, right? It's Purdue got bigger in the front court, and Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough brought size and beef there, but the backcourt wasn't big from a height perspective. Braden Smith is small. CJ Cox isn't exactly tall. Fletcher Loyer is taller, but is fairly slender, isn't exactly the most physical guard out there. Jakari Harris and Omer Meyer have some beef to them, but then there's not a ton of depth in the front court. Daniel Jacobson went through it as a freshman. That showed up as the season went along. And while he did some decent things in the Arizona game at times, it wasn't a great freshman year for him. And breaking his leg last year certainly didn't help matters. But then Jack Benner does some awesome things at the 4. But he's pretty small, right? The size thing just... It's ironic that Purdue was the team that got bit by size a little bit because Purdue has always been so big. And while Purdue's front court was big this season, you saw the sport shift towards the ultimate size concept. Look at the Final Four. 3 of the teams in the Final Four are gigantic. Michigan, Illinois, and Arizona. That size is a really, really big deal, and those are 3 of the 9 teams Purdue lost to this year. There's no shortage of criticism out there, and feel how you feel. I don't really care. I'll just say this. Be careful what you wish for. What Purdue has going on right now has been really, really successful. Is it sustainable? Time will tell, but in my view, the only thing that's really a grave threat to what Purdue has going on is the monopoly money around the sport that we don't really know how real it is or isn't, but clearly some teams are really willing to throw money around at a high level, and if you don't match that, then yeah, this isn't going to be sustainable forever. But if Purdue has the resources to continue to compensate its roster pretty well and continue to recruit at a pretty decent level of guys that fit what Purdue wants to do, you're looking at a program that's going to continue to be in the mix nationally and be nationally relevant. And that's all you can ask for. Purdue didn't have the length, quickness, and athleticism to keep up with Arizona for 40 minutes, but who did? I know the goal is to make Final Fours and win national championships. Purdue ran into an awesome team. And if you're in a different region, maybe you don't run into that. Maybe you run into a Duke team that was probably more gettable. Maybe you run into a situation where Iowa knocks off Florida and then you're in the Elite Eight playing Iowa. The NCAA tournament kind of is what it is. It's a blind draw sometimes. You don't know what you can do. You can only control what you can control. If you want Purdue to drastically change the way it does things, okay. Just be careful what you wish for, because the other side of that card might not necessarily be the glitz and glamour that you're hoping for. You got a lot going for you right now, and winning as much as Purdue has over the last 4 years and over the last 10 years, that's not something that should be taken for granted. This episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking about insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks. Next week, I'll do a full episode on where Purdue goes from here and what lies ahead for the Purdue program with the senior class departing, but a couple of main items to note here for the upcoming week. Obviously, I haven't really talked about Oscar Clough on the episode because the future remains in ever so slight lingo. I don't know. So, as it stands, Oscar Clough is out of eligibility. He did play junior college basketball, though. He has only played 3 years of NCAA basketball, and that leaves a possible door open based on other legal cases that have been filed against the NCAA. Now, this is the same argument that Joey Aguilar, the Tennessee quarterback, went to court over and did not win. He was denied, and now he's moving on. That's pretty much all done. It would require another challenge, I think, of that rule in court, the junior college eligibility counting towards your 4 years rule. I don't know. Two things here. How much does Oscar Clough want to come back? Is suing the NCAA a route he's willing to go down? Because that's a pretty big commitment, right? That's a really big commitment to do that. Or does he just move on? I'm going to guess, if you put a gun to my head here, I'm going to guess that nothing goes on. Oscar Clough moves on, and Purdue moves on. Both sides just go their separate ways and don't bring this to the forefront of a national deal. I don't know that. But regardless, Purdue needs to know this as soon as possible. Because if Clough is really going to push for this, and if you think you have a decent chance at this happening, then you probably approach the offseason a little differently. If not, then you kind of approach it how you figured you would. The transfer portal opens the day after the national title game. The activity is picking up across the nation. This will be a huge week of players announcing their intentions to enter the portal. The recruiting really accelerating, even though it's certainly already underway. Purdue has already added Caden Pierce, the forward from Princeton. He'll come in with 1 year of eligibility, play the 4 spot, maybe slide to the 3 spot a little bit. When you look at the sheer turnover Purdue will have on its roster, there's not a clear and obvious player where you look at and say, oh, they'll transfer. When you look back at last season, it was very obvious that Brian Waddell and Will Berg would likely look to move on. And it shouldn't have come to a surprise to anyone that Miles Colvin and Camden Heide transferred either. Miles Colvin was in a compromising position as far as playing time goes, and Camden Heide wasn't likely to start. Purdue made it pretty clear that it was going to go look to get bigger, slide Trey Kaufman-Renn to the 4, and play a traditional 5 next to him. This year, Purdue loses 4 starters. That's a different conversation. If you've learned anything from the transfer portal era, it's that you should always expect anything. Truly anything can happen here. So we'll see on that front. Does Purdue have any departures? I don't know. It's probably a fair bet that someone will. I'm not in the business of talking about whether players will or won't transfer. I don't do that. I never have. It's not something I'm going to engage in. But even if no departures take place, I do think Purdue would be wise to look at the center position. That's your spot. That's your spot where you have a lot of unknown right now. Right now, Daniel Jacobson's coming back. Raleigh Burgess comes off a red shirt. He's probably more of a 4-5 tweener guy. You're pretty big with him at the 4. You're pretty small with him at the 5. And so Sanan Juan comes in as a true freshman, a pretty unknown commodity there. I'm not quite sure how ready he'll be to make an impact from day one. Maybe very, maybe not at all in red shirts. I have no clue. We'll find out. But that's a pretty big question mark for a position group that's so important when you're in the Big Ten and when you're at this level. I'm very curious to see what Purdue does there. Does it look to add? It isn't the easiest spot to add, right? Everyone in the country wants more size, and you do have bodies there that are going to be competition for anyone you bring in. So it's not the easiest spot to land, but if I had to guess, Purdue will look at the center position. Whether it takes anyone or not, we'll see. But that's the one. If nobody leaves in the portal, that's the only spot I think you're really looking at as a potential area of need. And as I said, next week on the show, we'll do a big dive into what Purdue has coming back and what next season might look like, what the future might look like for Purdue after it bids farewell to one of the best classes that the program has ever had. This marks the end of another season here, my 6th season talking about Purdue football and basketball here on the podcast. Thank you to all of you who listen. This isn't a show that I do to make money. The only ad is for myself as an insurance agent. It's something I do for fun. It's something I do for fun to interact with you all, to talk about Purdue sports. Obviously, I love doing it. But thank you all for listening. It's been a really challenging season at times to talk about things, to find fresh stuff to talk about on a weekly basis with such a known group, and some real disappointment at times, but a really fun ending. There is nothing like the NCAA tournament, and being able to come on here and talk about that with you all was a blast, and I'm already excited, man. Already excited for year 7, everything that's to come, but we're going to have a ton of content here coming up in the ensuing weeks. Got some fun guests lined up to talk about Purdue basketball here, and really look back on what has been a blast and what is ahead for a program that will go through some real change here. So thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already so that you don't miss episodes moving forward. Come say hey on Twitter. Send me questions for next week's episode. Send me questions about the future of Purdue basketball, what next year might look like. I'm open for everything. So send me questions on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. You can always email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Until next week, guys, take care. Enjoy the Final Four. We'll talk soon.